We weren't supposed to be there. It started as a routine dig, another attempt by archaeologists to unravel the mysteries of Stonehenge. The media had moved on from our research months ago, but Dr. Evelyn Carter, our lead archaeologist, was convinced we were on the verge of something big. She was right. I remember the exact moment it happened. The wind had died down, the overcast sky hanging low over Salisbury Plain. Our team had spent weeks scanning beneath the surface with ground-penetrating radar, finding anomalies, but nothing solid. Until today. Dr. Carter stood over the latest pit we had dug, her gloved hands trembling with excitement. "We've hit something," she whispered, voice tight with anticipation. The other archaeologists and I gathered, staring down at what appeared to be a flat, impossibly smooth black stone buried just beneath the soil. It wasn't natural. At first, we thought it was some kind of ritual altar. Then we saw the carvings, intricate, alien symbols that didn't match any known civilization. They twisted and curved in ways that made my eyes ache just looking at them. "This is it," Carter murmured. "This is what we've been looking for." The team went silent. Even the air around us seemed to still, as if the earth itself was waiting. Then, the stone moved. It didn't crack or break apart. It slid open. A perfect, seamless doorway, revealing a descending tunnel. A breath of air, cold and stale, wafted up from the darkness. I swallowed hard. "We need to report this?" Carter shook her head. "Not yet. We go in first." Against every instinct screaming at me to stop, we gathered our gear and stepped inside. The tunnel walls were smooth, impossibly so, like they had been cut with precision tools far beyond anything ancient civilizations should have possessed. Our flashlights cast long, trembling shadows as we descended a series of steps carved into the earth. Dr. Patel, our geologist, ran her hand along the stone. This isn't natural limestone. It's something else. Something wrong, I wanted to say. The deeper we went, the stronger the air seemed to press in around us. Not just cold, thick, charged, like an unseen presence watching us. Then we reached the chamber. The space was enormous, a vast cavern carved beneath the monument above. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly with a sickly blue-green hue. A massive black monolith stood at the center of the room, its surface covered in the same alien etchings. It pulsed like a heartbeat. My breath hitched. "Is that alive?" Dr. Carter stepped closer. "Not alive. A machine." The moment she said it, the monolith responded. A low hum filled the air, deep and resonant, vibrating through my bones. The symbols brightened, casting eerie shadows across the chamber. The floor beneath us trembled. Then came the whispers. Not from the walls. Not from the monolith. From inside our heads. A voice, ancient and unfathomable, coiled into my thoughts like a tendril of smoke. "You should not have come," Dr. Patel screamed. She clutched her head, falling to her knees, eyes wide with terror. Blood trickled from her nose. "Get back!" I shouted, grabbing Carter's arm. "We need to go." But it was too late. The chamber rumbled, the stone shifting like something beneath it was waking up. The monolith's pulse quickened, the hum growing into a deafening roar. Then, the walls cracked open, and something moved inside them. We had found the chamber beneath Stonehenge. I wish we hadn't. The walls were moving. No, not moving, peeling open. The once solid stone cracked apart like a shedding cocoon, revealing something underneath. At first, I thought it was more of the same black material as the monolith, but then it shifted and I realized the truth. It was flesh. Slick, black, and glistening like something pulled from the depths of the ocean, the writhing mass behind the stone was alive. It pulsed in time with the monolith's eerie heartbeat, stretching across the walls and ceiling like a vast, pulsating membrane. Dr. Patel was still on the floor, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Dr. Carter knelt beside her, trying to shake her awake, but Patel's eyes were wide and vacant, her lips moving in silent prayer. Then she started whispering. At first, it was barely audible over the droning hum that filled the chamber. But then the words became clearer. Not English. Not any language I recognized. A guttural, alien tongue, slipping from her mouth like an incantation. Patel. I grabbed her shoulders, shaking her violently. Snap out of it! Her gaze snapped to mine, her pupils dilated too far, swallowing nearly all of the brown in her irises. Then she whispered a final word, one that the monolith answered. The heartbeat sound stopped. Silence swallowed the chamber, thick and suffocating. Then, the monolith cracked open. A deep, wet sound filled the cavern as the black stone split apart, revealing something inside. A mass of twisted, skeletal figures, fused together in an impossible tangle of limbs and faces, each one frozen in an expression of endless, silent screaming. I stumbled backward, bile rising in my throat. The shapes were human. Or at least, they had been once. And then, they moved. Hands jerked forward, bony fingers stretching unnaturally as if waking from eons of slumber. The mouths, still frozen in their expressions of agony, started to shift, cracking open too wide, revealing rows of jagged, blackened teeth. "Run!" I screamed. Carter dragged Patel to her feet, but the geologist was limp, her lips still forming silent words. She was still speaking to it. The figures lunged. I grabbed Carter's arm and pulled her back as one of the creatures slashed at us with fingers too long, their tips tapering into something sharper than bone should be. The air itself seemed to warp around them, the shadows distorting as if the room was no longer obeying the rules of space. Carter hauled Patel up the steps, her feet dragging uselessly behind her. I turned to follow, but something cold wrapped around my ankle. I looked down. A hand, half-rotted and fused to the floor, had wrapped its fingers around my boot. The moment I saw it, pain spiked through my mind, like a hot needle stabbing into my skull. Images flooded my vision. A world older than time. A civilization lost before the first human had ever walked the earth. A race of beings that had existed before even the stars had formed. And then the war. I saw them, the creatures that had built this place. Not aliens. Not gods. Something else. Something the universe itself had tried to erase. And we had just woken them up. I tore my leg free, ignoring the searing pain as my skin burned where the thing had touched me. I turned and bolted, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. The creatures weren't chasing us. Not in the way you'd expect. They moved wrong, phasing in and out of existence, appearing ahead of us, behind us, on the walls, their limbs stretching and contorting like time itself was breaking. We burst back into the tunnel, Carter dragging Patel beside her. The light from our flashlights flickered violently as if the batteries were already dying. We were almost at the exit when Carter screamed. I turned just in time to see Patel's body jerk backward, as if yanked by something unseen. 1 second she was with us, the next, she was gone. The tunnel behind us was dark now. Not natural darkness, something deeper. Something hungry. Patel. Carter screamed, clawing at the ground where she'd been. I grabbed her. We have to go. She fought me for only a moment, then reality crashed in, and we ran. We burst out of the tunnel into the open air. The sky had turned wrong. The clouds were twisting, moving too fast, the sun flickering as if struggling to stay in place. And then the ground started shaking. The stones of Stonehenge moved, their ancient surfaces cracking, glowing with that same unnatural blue-green light from the chamber. We stumbled back as the entire site began to shift, the monoliths turning, rearranging themselves as if responding to something beneath them. Then we heard the sound. A deep, guttural growl, not from any one throat but from many, all layered together, vibrating in the air itself. Carter clutched my arm, her face pale as death. What have we done? I had no answer. Because I knew one thing for certain. We hadn't just found a hidden chamber. We had opened a door. And something was coming through. The sky rippled. Not like clouds moving in the wind, like fabric being pulled too tight, warping and stretching as if reality itself was struggling to hold together. The monoliths of Stonehenge groaned as they twisted unnaturally, their ancient stones grinding against each other with a sound that scraped across my nerves like broken glass. And then the light changed. The sun, which had been flickering, dimmed. Shadows lengthened, stretching out from the stones like hungry tendrils, twisting across the ground toward us. A pulse rumbled up from below. Something beneath Stonehenge had awakened. Dr. Carter and I stood frozen, gasping for breath, our bodies still shaking from the horror we had just escaped. But Patel was gone, taken by something inside that chamber, and the whispers in my head still hadn't stopped. I staggered back, clutching my skull. The door is open. The door is open. The door is open. The final whisper came from outside my head. A voice that did not belong to me. Carter gasped beside me. We turned together. A figure stood at the center of the stones, where the black slab had once been buried. No, not one figure. Many. They were shifting, flickering in and out of focus, as if they were only half real. Humanoid, but wrong, bodies stretched too thin, faces indistinct, their forms twisting like something seen through a heat wave. And then the shadows reached us. The first touch was cold, a sensation so deep it burned. Carter screamed, her legs buckling as the darkness wrapped around her ankles, dragging her forward. No! I lunged, grabbing her arm. But the shadows pulled harder. The figures stepped closer, their movements impossibly smooth, as if gliding rather than walking. One tilted its head, and a voice, inside my mind, spoke. "You are not meant to be here." I yanked Carter back with every ounce of strength I had. The moment her legs left the shadow, the burning grip on her was gone, and she collapsed against me, panting. The figures did not chase us. They simply stood there, watching, waiting. And then, one of them lifted an arm, pointing back toward the tunnel we had fled from. I didn't understand at first. Then Carter whispered, "Patel?" I turned, my stomach twisting. A shape was emerging from the darkness of the tunnel. Dr. Patel. Or something that looked like her. Her skin was pale, as if drained of all color, her eyes too wide, her pupils gone, just two endless black voids. She moved wrong, her joints bending at angles that made my stomach churn. She opened her mouth. "We should not have left." The voice that came out was not Patel's. It was many voices, layered on top of each other, deep, ancient, endless. I felt my entire body lock up, like something inside me recognized the sound, something buried in the primal part of my mind that knew this was not human. Carter was shaking. That's not her." Patel took another step forward, her head tilting too far to the side, watching us. Behind her, in the tunnel, I saw movement. More of them. Hundreds. Shapes slithering out from the dark, their forms flickering between human and something else. Their eyes, black and endless, locked on us. Carter grabbed my hand. "We have to get out of here." I nodded. We turned to run. And then Patel spoke again. "You cannot run from them. They are already here." I made the mistake of looking up. The sky was gone. Or maybe it had never been real. Above us, where the gray English clouds should have been, was nothing but void, a vast, endless expanse of black, speckled with shifting shapes that were watching us. The sky wasn't just wrong. It was alive. I felt my mind fracturing just looking at it. Something deep in my chest, a primal, instinctual understanding, screamed that I was seeing something no human was meant to see. The figures beneath the stones took another step forward. Patel raised a trembling, twisted hand. And the last thing I heard before we ran was her whispering voice. "They are waking up." We ran. The air thickened around us, pressing against my chest like an invisible force was trying to hold me in place. Every step felt like moving through water, my legs sluggish, my breath ragged. Carter was gasping beside me, but neither of us stopped. We couldn't stop. The shadows slithered across the ground, reaching for us with hungry, grasping tendrils. The figures from the monoliths were moving now, no longer just watching. Their faces flickered in and out of focus, as if they couldn't decide what shape to take. And behind us, Patel's voice echoed. "You cannot leave. You cannot leave. You cannot." I clenched my teeth and pushed harder. The tunnel back to the surface was ahead, a jagged gash in the earth that led to daylight. The stone walls shimmered, almost translucent, as if whatever force had been holding the chamber hidden for centuries was breaking apart. But as we got closer, the world shifted. The tunnel began to change. The jagged walls smoothed, turning into something sleek and metallic. Symbols, not human symbols, began glowing across the surface, pulsing in rhythmic patterns. The daylight at the end of the tunnel? It was gone. In its place was a swirling void, stretching infinitely, stars and galaxies warping in and out of existence within it. I skidded to a stop, dragging Carter back before she could step through. My mind screamed at me. This was not the exit anymore. "They are changing it," Carter whispered, terror in her voice. The stone tunnel had become something else. Something wrong. A gateway. "It leads somewhere else now," I choked out. A low, throbbing hum vibrated through the walls, like an engine waking up after millennia of sleep. The symbols burned brighter. I turned back. The figures were closer, their dark forms gliding toward us, their heads tilting in unnatural synchrony. The thing that had been Patel stood among them, her hollow black eyes locked on mine. And then she smiled. A slow, creeping, inhuman smile. "We have been waiting," she said, her voice no longer a whisper but a chorus of many voices. "And now the door is open." The tunnel rippled, shifting around us like a living thing. The air twisted, warping between our world and something beyond. Carter grabbed my wrist. "We have to choose." The figures surged forward. The shadows at our feet rose up. There were only two choices: stay and be taken, or step into the unknown. I didn't let myself hesitate. I grabbed Carter's hand, and we jumped into the void. I expected to feel nothingness, cold, death, oblivion. Instead, I felt motion, falling, tumbling through light and darkness, past galaxies and stars, past things I couldn't comprehend. Voices whispered all around us, whispering in a language I didn't know but somehow understood. And then, we stopped. I landed hard, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs. Silence. A thin mist curled around us, and I pushed myself up, every muscle trembling. Carter was beside me, coughing, her eyes wide with shock. We were no longer beneath Stonehenge. We weren't even on Earth. The landscape was endless. A barren, lifeless plain stretching as far as the eye could see, beneath a sky that wasn't a sky at all. It was a swirling expanse of shifting color like a living aurora. Floating shapes, monolithic, massive, alien structures, hung in the distance, their surfaces etched with the same symbols we had seen in the tunnel. Carter whispered, "Where the hell are we?" I didn't have an answer, but I felt something. A presence. Watching. Waiting. And in that moment, I knew. We hadn't escaped. We had just gone deeper. The real chamber wasn't beneath Stonehenge. It was here. And we had just stepped inside.